All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome in. Welcome to our first ever virtual exhibition. We're so glad that you're able to join us today and these fantastic artists and designers. My name is Lauren Clark, and I represent A&D strategy here at Interface. And today's session is really part of our overall Together by Design series, which was created to keep the spirit of connection alive in such a different year that looks a lot different than years past. And we not only wanted to inspire you, our amazing customers, with some beautiful work, but also to introduce you to some new design community members. This year looks a lot different for a lot of us, but especially those who are entering the career world now, today. So you'll see them here and we'll introduce them in just a moment, but I did want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. The first is you'll notice that you are muted, and this is just to avoid any disruption during the presentation, but we do want to hear from you. So if you would at any time drop a question into this question box you see to the right of your screen, and we'll get to those a little bit later, as many as we can. And the second is that today's session is being recorded. And tomorrow a link will go out to access it to the email address you used to register for today. So that's one way to access it. And then another way is to head over to interface.com. The Together by Design series has a hub over there, and there's a lot of great content. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, I highly recommend it. So you can find this there too. Okay. So today, my friend and colleague Gretchen Wagner will lead the discussion. Gretchen is a designer on our creative team, which is part of the overall marketing umbrella. And Gretchen's myriad of talents is really an asset to our team and an inspiration on a daily basis for me. So I have enjoyed watching her curate this exhibition, and she has a special personal connection to today, which I won't spoil and I'll let her tell you about. But I want to turn it over to Gretchen, and then I will pop back on later to help facilitate questions. So over to you, Gretchen.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation. My name is Gretchen Wagner, as Lauren mentioned. I am a designer at Interface on the creative team, and my special little secret is I am also a SCAD Fibers alumni. So I am very, very excited and honored as a member of both of these communities to share Interface's first ever design exhibition in collaboration with SCAD alumni and the Department for Career and Alumni Success. So with that, I am going to get started sharing the presentation. Go. Oops. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. Amid a year of unforeseen challenges, Interface wanted to engage and support our design community, which is you guys, in a very different way. So we curated this virtual exhibition not only to showcase the incredible talent that is graduating from SCAD, but also to inspire you, as Lauren mentioned. So the exhibition includes 14 recent graduates from the Savannah College of Art and Design class of 2020. They are artists, designers, influencers, future leaders in sustainability, and they are graduating from a wide array of concentrations and disciplines, including fibers, painting, industrial design, product design, and interior design. Some of these students also have additional studies with minors in printmaking, art history, furniture design, and design for sustainability, which is really cool. This project, though, could not have been completed without the help from SCAD's Department for Career and Alumni Success, who partnered with us to really jumpstart this exhibition. So we have a placeholder here for Career and Alumni Success at SCAD, just kind of showing through all of the different resources that they provide for both students and alumni on their journey at SCAD and after they've graduated from SCAD, to make sure that they get placed appropriately in their fields of study. So now, without waiting any longer, I'm going to introduce you to the other 4 people that have joined me today and dedicated their wonderful time. And these 4 alumni have joined us in conversation on their creative process and their inspiration. We have Brett Akop, a BFA in industrial design major with a minor in furniture design. Ashna Mullik with a BFA in painting. Rebecca Schroeder with her BFA in interior design. And Victoria Wanjuhi with her Master of Fine Arts in Fibers. So we will begin today's discussion with representation from SCAD's industrial design and furniture design programs with Brett Akop and his projects Blue and Sprout. And I will now turn the conversation over to Brett.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Brett Akop. As Gretchen said, I majored in industrial design and minored in furniture design. And this project is Blue. It's a form study inspired by the design language of Andrea Borgogni. I don't know if anyone is familiar with him, but he has some really beautiful furniture designs. The idea behind the project was to mimic an already existing product language to prove that you could design with certain restraints of form. So this was my attempt at replicating his design language with sculptural geometry and really cool convex and concave forms, as well as some very interesting surface transitions, and just it's really just a nice sculpture. It's really just like a cool sculpture that represents his work as a designer. But related to the product design aspect of it, if I were to work at a company, let's say, this proves that I'm able to work within the form languages that they have within their company. So yeah, there's no function behind it or anything. It was really just to capture a certain aesthetic, really just create something interesting and something evocative as well. When I finished making it, a lot of my friends and peers, they kind of said that it looks like a human body, kind of like stretching back, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, I just kind of got carried away and made something that I really enjoyed. I think this is a good representation of who I am as a designer too, even though there isn't much of a function to it, which is interesting.
Hey, Brett, can I pipe in here and ask you something?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask what materials were actually used in the fabrication of this sculptural form study.
So it's actually 3D printed, and I sanded and painted it. And then the wooden base that is on is spalted maple.
Nice.
So it's all just.
And what? Oh, go ahead.
No, that was it.
And what prompted the color selection of being this really kind of bright blue, almost like an Yves Klein shade of blue?
It was really inspired by the designer I drew inspiration from. He had a lot of bold colors, and I wanted to pick something that he hasn't necessarily used, but I feel like would fall into the category of his work.
Very cool. Nice. All right, and moving on to Brett's next project here, Sprout. I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So I took a metal fabrication class at SCAD, and we had 2 weeks to design and fabricate a coat rack using the metal practices that were given to us. So this is all fabricated from scratch. It's 1-inch mild steel tubing that was all bent by hand and welded together. I also fabricated the wooden tray that you see down there, all of the kind of like knobs at the end that assist with putting your coat down and everything. So I actually have a fine arts background, so a lot of my work ties back into like a strong visual presence, I think. And you know, majoring in industrial design, I really translated that craftsmanship towards product design as well. I also really like bold colors too, so as you can see with Blue and also Sprout, it's a lot of really vibrant. There's a lot of vibrancy to my work, I think.
Yeah, I love it. I love the hand-milled piece of wood there that you have kind of as a surface that you can rest things on, like your keys.
Yeah.
I did have a question here. How are you planning on taking, if you are planning on taking any of these products into production? And more specifically, where can I get my own Sprout coat rack?
So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to make any more before I had to leave SCAD and come back home. Uh, but hopefully one day I'll be able to replicate them again, because I do really like this design and I think it lends itself well towards production, just because it
Yeah.
is really simple fabricating techniques.
Yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. And I love the photography here as well. It's beautiful. Thank you. All right, so next up on our SCAD alumni page, we have Ashna Mullik, a graduate from SCAD's painting program. And she's going to take us through some of her recent work, some of her process, and some of her inspiration behind those works.
Hi, everyone. So as mentioned, my name is Ashna. I'm from New Delhi, India. And I use a variety of digital and traditional media and various other techniques to create works using dynamic lines and saturated colors like the ones you're seeing in front of you. And my work mostly investigates ideas of perception, distortion, immersion, and giving the viewer an experience. I think I draw inspiration mostly from, our senses are limited. So the information that we gather to create our understanding and perceptions of our reality are limited. So through my work, I want to distort one's perception and make the viewer question what they're seeing. So I deal with a lot of this distortion, this perception, and I use these dynamic lines and these vibrant colors, saturated colors to do that. Yeah, so I aim to distort one's perception, make one question what they might be seeing, and I want my work to be more than just something someone views. I also want it to be an experience. So I have experimented with digital media. I've experimented with projections to create immersion in a way, but yeah, that's mostly what my work is about. So how I make these works is, as you can see over here, is that I use vinyl and hand-cut stencils to create these works. And a lot of the work goes in during the preliminary process before I actually start making the work. So it's a lot of color studies. I create the pattern digitally. I see what will look good. I create layers, and then I either hand cut the stencil or get it plotted on vinyl and layer them on top of each other and add these colors in to get the desired effect, basically. So yeah, that's what my work is about, and that's how I create my work.
Ashna, I find this process of using these hand-cut vinyl kind of like decals to lay on top and be able to use as large-scale stencils to be really incredible, especially because I'm sure that they're a bit finicky to kind of put down and adhere onto the surface there. Can you describe a little bit more about how you're selecting colors in your design and art process, and also what kinds of materials you're using for pigment and kind of the board that you're using and placing that image on top of?
Yeah. So I use vibrant and saturated colors that clash with each other to get the desired effect I want. So it plays with orange and blue that are on the opposite end of the color of the color wheel. So when you place them against each other, your eyes, your rods and cones kind of play with each other, and that's where that whole idea of experience comes in, where you're just not just seeing the work, but there's something happening when you look at the painting. So that's how I make my color decisions. So it involves a lot of color studies to see what goes with what kind of effect what creates when I change my gradient, how the way it's interacting with the other color changes. So through those studies, I see what I want to use in my painting. And most of these paintings that you're seeing over here are done on canvas, mostly because when I was at SCAD, I was worried about storage and either going back home to India or something along those lines. So I thought it would be very easy to just unstretch them, roll them up and take them back home. But it would be much easier to do them on panel. But yeah, so I either hand cut the stencil or I get it vinyl plotted and I'll put it on and use either spray paint or acrylic paint to get the colors that I want.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that because some of these look like they have almost a bit more of an ethereal, like an airbrush type quality. So in some instances, you're applying the pigment with spray, like an aerosol format.
Yeah, all of the ones that you're seeing on the screen right now were done with spray paint.
Very cool. I'm just going to actually go back on some of your work here. We don't have examples of the digital media work during this presentation, but we do have some that are going up into the blog article with the remainder of the exhibition. But can you explain to me a little bit about your process with working with digital media and how, as a painting student, you started to explore something that's a bit more high tech and less touch oriented?
Yeah. So I think my first inclination towards digital media started in our new curriculum in the painting department. We were offered a new class called Digital Tools for Fine Arts, where we were taught ways that we could include these digital tools into our practice, whether it was our painting practice or whether we wanted to take things digitally. So that's where I first tried my hand at projection mapping, creating videos, and things like that. And the process, projection mapping especially, I really enjoyed because I've always wanted to create an experience. So using projections to create an immersive environment is something I'm really interested in. I've also been trying to learn a software where I can make my projections more interactive, so you can play. All of these things is what I've been kind of looking into during this whole quarantine period, trying to learn something new and see where I can take my work.
Excellent. And that actually brings up another, question that I have in myself, and that is, how have you been occupying yourself over the last 4 months? I know that you've only recently graduated from SCAD in the last, 2 months or so, but how has it been kind of as a fine artist working in this more remote type of setting?
So it was a bit confusing at first when first it was announced that our classes would be online and we wouldn't have access to our studio spaces, and I was a little confused about how I would make my work. But it was a good opportunity to try to adapt and do things differently. So I scaled down my work a lot. I usually used to make medium-sized works, and I scaled them down to small-sized works. And that's when I discovered that I could make the work that I was making by using hand-cut stencils. So it opened up a new ideas of new processes, which I'm glad I was able to experiment with. And so I created my little apartment.
Oh, Ashna, your audio just cut out for a moment. Ashna, are you still there?
Work there. But since I graduated, I've been kind of moving around, so I haven't had too much time. So I'm making use of my laptop right now.
Excellent, excellent. Sorry, there was a moment there where you kind of cut in and out of the audio. So you've been saying that in quarantine, the scale of your work has gotten a little bit smaller, and that you have been doing some of these vinyl stencils, cutting them by hand, but also focusing a little bit more on the digital side of things, working on your computer, correct?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Awesome, okay. Wonderful, thank you, Ashna. And our next alumna is Rebecca Schroeder. She is representing SCAD's Interior Design Department, and today she is sharing her capstone project, Eudaimonia.
Yes, hi, I'm Rebecca Schroeder, as mentioned before. Eudaimonia, what it is the wellness facility that incorporates all forms of wellness: physical, social, spiritual, and emotional. And wellness, especially physical wellness, has become increasingly popular in today's time. But it's also critical to note that the other forms of wellness, the social, spiritual, and emotional, are just as important in one's overall health. This particular facility is located in Providence, Rhode Island. Providence is actually number 6 in the nation for national depression disorder. So this is a great opportunity for a facility like this to thrive and benefit the community. Before we go into it, to orientate you, it's a 4-story building. So the first floor and the second floor are for physical wellness. The third floor is personalized services. And then the fourth floor, the rooftop, is going to be healthy lifestyle and healthy nutritional value focused. So to the right, you can see the entry vestibule. It's a bearable vestibule, and lined is cove lighting that wraps around that reception desk that you can see beyond the door. What that does is it draws the user into the space through the vestibule into the lobby, really merging those 3 spaces together and merging them into one space in an entity. We can go on to the next slide, Gretchen. This is the floor plan for the first floor. Featured is the main gym space, some warm-up areas, locker rooms, as well as some retail touch points and childcare center. To the left, you can see one of the retail experiences. This gets a lot of visual traffic. Everyone using this facility is going to pass it no matter what service they're going to this facility for. Also want to note that there's a lot of natural materials being used through all the different renderings and spaces, and this is definitely the case in this left retail rendering. To the right, you can see one of the warm-up spaces for the main gym experience. I want to point out the padded turf for the warm-up area. That nodes a little node to nature, bringing that liveliness inside. And then beyond that, you can see the facade of the locker rooms. All the wayfinding throughout this facility is a red oak inlay. That the thought behind that is the most abundant tree in the area is red oak. And so using that integrates it into the site itself, and then having it integrated into the architecture, as you can see from the icons, it makes it a little bit more subtle. So a lot of people are coming to this facility for very public services, like going to the gym. And then people are coming to this facility for a little bit more intimate services. So like the counseling center and the float room and salt room that you're going to see on the personalized floor on the 3rd level. So having it a little bit more subtle is going to create ease for everyone using the space. Going on to the 2nd level, this is physical wellness driven as well. You're going to see a lot of the studio spaces here, and they're orientated from the loudest to the quietest. So on the far right-hand side, you can see the spin room. In the middle, you'll see a boxing room, and then towards the right, adjacent to the employees' break room, is the yoga studio. On the upper left-hand corner is a workplace that overlooks an atrium that connects the 1st floor and the 2nd floor. Being that these 2 floors are physical wellness driven, we wanted to keep that visual connection in between the 2 floors by creating an atrium to visually connect the 2 spaces. We can move on. This is a glimpse of one of the studio spaces. This is the spin room. The natural tones and seamless planes throughout this space represent the blank canvas that everyone comes into this spin class having. And I want to point out the felt wrap panels behind the instructor that wrap up the wall and branch out towards the users. What this does is it architecturally defines that workout zone, and it drives the user's vision to the instructor and really immerses them into that cycling experience.
I want to just jump in here real quick, Rebecca. As someone who has taken some spin classes in the past, I absolutely love how light and open this is, because so oftentimes it sort of feels like you're insulated in a theater, and it's a little bit darker and it's really loud. So I love the thoughtfulness of this design, bringing some natural light into the spin room.
Yes, it's faced in 2 sides with the curtain walls. So you're getting definitely a lot of that natural daylight into the space.
Yeah.
This is level 3. So this is where those personalized services are going to be held. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see the waiting room where the receptionist will grab the patient and then bring them to the appropriate space in that U-shaped corridor. The orientation of these programs within this space. They're organized by what's most private, what needs to be most public, and so on. So adjacent to the waiting room, we have 3 float rooms. Everything is done being behind closed doors, so that can be is appropriate to be near that such public space of the waiting room. On the right-hand side, along that glass wall, is the counseling rooms. And then along the bottom, we have a SOLT room and some massage and service rooms. And then in the middle of that corridor, you have the changing room for the SOLT room, and then a dermatology center. Here is a view of those lobby waiting spaces. This is organized and designed based on comfort theory. So the idea behind that is you have a bunch of different people coming to the space, and they're going to have different levels of comfort, and you want to provide options for those levels of comfort. So on the left-hand side, you have a large waiting area, and then on the right-hand side, something a little bit more intimate. I want to also note that on all the different levels, in machine called the Van Gogh 360 is integrated in all the HVAC systems. It's especially important in this floor. It emits essential oils, and what this does is it helps with aromatherapy throughout the space with the appropriate scents that are emitted through different times of the day and the different programs within the space. So
that
moving on. This is a glimpse of some of the service rooms. So on the left-hand side is the SOLT room. And for those who don't know, SOLT rooms are great for asthma, for any respiratory issues and skincare. As SOLT is semi-transparent, we backlit those walls to create a soft, warm pink glow. And then on the right-hand side, we have the float room. This is great to relieve anxiety, depression, and overall mental clarity. SOLT rooms can be very confusing, especially if one hasn't ever used the space before. So we wanted to keep everything monochromatic and simple so one can focus on the task at hand while being surrounded by a comforting environment. This is the last level, the rooftop view. So on the upper left-hand corner, we have a smoothie bar that has a bunch of seating all around the rooftop patio, outlooking river, views of the city. And then in the center, you have a studio class where people can learn about nutrition and how to make meals for their family and for their friends. So diving into the renderings, this is the view of the gathering space for the studio class. So once everyone has learned all those great nutritional values and facts, they've made their meal, they can gather around this table and enjoy that with their family and friends. And then I want to point out the curtain wall beyond that gathering space pivots at a 45-degree angle. What this does is it blurs that line between outdoor and indoor, really merging those two spaces, but still gives the privacy that cooking class needs to function. And then lastly, I'm going to leave you guys with these 2 renderings of the exterior rooftop view. It's encouraged for everyone, excuse me, for everyone to use all levels. So to implement that, we have a storage unit. On the left-hand side, rendering in the back, you can see a storage unit that holds yoga mats and other small workout equipment where one can grab that and do some yoga or do a light workout with a friend. Or if they would like, they can grab a smoothie from the smoothie bar located on this rooftop view and sit in one of the seating, enjoying the view, the company of their family, and creating some of those lasting memories and moments within this facility.
Absolutely wonderful, Rebecca. Thank you so much. I particularly love the thoughtful attention to the color palettes and material selections, especially the incorporation of the red oak being so prominent in the Rhode Island area and in that geography. It makes a lot of sense to kind of bring that in, and it's a really nice touch. I wanted to ask you one question about this being a bit more of a wellness community type center. Do you perceive this being something that that a company would subscribe and have a membership type thing where their employees can go access that, or is it something where on an individual basis, you can utilize the salt room or the workout room, or you can just use the counseling facilities.
I think it's a good idea for both to be implemented, so that everyone can definitely be using the space. I imagined definitely almost be like a membership program where you can use the facilities if you pay X amount, and then you're gonna have to pay an additive fee for some of those personalized rooms, where if you want to just go for the day, you can pay a little bit of a higher fee to use the facility or get a membership for the particular need that you need.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, and our last alumna for today is Victoria Wanjuhi. And last but not least, of course, she is a SCAD Fibers MFA graduate, which is, of course, the program of study that I have the most connection to. And she'll be discussing her projects, Cluster and Scraps of Denim.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria, like she said. So I come from a fashion background, and when I went back to get my master's degree, I was approaching it as a fashion designer. So I wanted to create swatches and really experiment with the material. And so this is one of the first classes I took, basically the knitting class, that I created this piece Cluster. And my first year, I was creating swatches where I was playing with patterns, colors, and trying different materials combination. In my second year, when I was starting to focus more on my thesis concept and what I really wanted to experiment with and really work on, I wanted to scale up. So I wanted to create more bigger pieces, more installation pieces, because in fashion, you're creating more functional pieces. So I wanted to just take the opportunity to go as abstract as possible. So Cluster is a large-scale knitted assembly inspired by spontaneous architecture and surrounding areas of low-income communities. It represents the action that takes place when repetitive objects with the same function have been closely built together. I come from Kenya. So in Kenya, I saw a lot of kind of free-formed architecture pieces being created from recycled materials by poor communities. And when I was creating this piece, I didn't want to just focus on the colors and the materials. I wanted to kind of bring attention to a problem that we're all facing that is being caused by all of us. So I should also mention that I focus on sustainable design. So in this piece being inspired by low income communities such as Favela and Kibera, the people who live in these communities are the people who, not all of them, but some of them work in landfills where our trash lands, right? And so I wanted to represent them here. So when my audience would see my work and ask me questions about it, it will become a discussion about low-income communities and landfills and waste. So this piece is made out of three parts. So the first part is Favela inspired, where I was knitting swatches and then putting it back on the knitting machine where I would add on. And then the second piece, Kibera, I would knit a swatch, whatever color it is, whatever pattern it is, maybe knit about 20 of them, and then go back and hand embroider them. And when you're working with the knitting machine, there's a lot of dropping the stitch or missing a stitch or something like that, and it could cause a headache for someone working with it. So I wanted to approach it like a more stress-free, where if I drop a stitch, that's fine. What you're seeing here is where I'm mending the piece itself with another yarn after I've knitted it. So it was also looking at mending techniques and also trying to not waste the materials that I was using.
I love that combination of mixing the machine knitting with some of these hand mending techniques. Can you go into a little bit more about the specific materials and the yarns that you're using and where you source those or where you're looking for those?
I got them either provided by the school or somebody donating it to me, because I put out a flyer out saying it was for denim, but also people donated other materials such as yarn, and also most of them they're store bought. So I actually myself bought them, but so this piece was created like a duration of 1 year. So in the beginning, it was all me. I was buying the yarn, I was choosing the colors. And as it grew bigger, where now I'm working on Kibera, because when you're looking at these low communities, you see like different materials being combined together. So I wanted to do the same for Kibera, which is the second piece, where I'm taking swatches that I was being donated or finding or all projects and then knitting it onto the piece. So it was recycled and bought, but mostly bought.
Excellent, very cool. All right, and I'll take you through, I'm seeing some of these dropped stitches that you were talking about and kind of some of those holes that come about with the machine knitting process. And then
Actually,
that brings us in. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
This part is not dropped. This is a design itself. So it's called, I forget the name of it, but it's a technique you do actually.
Oh, very cool, to create more open and lace-like type patterns.
Yeah,
I would.
where the yellow stitch onto the left side, that's where I dropped a stitch, most likely.
Excellent. And you mentioned scraps of denim and sort of sourcing some of those materials from fellow students in the program. So I'll go ahead and pull up those pieces as well for you to discuss.
Yes, so this is scraps of denim, where the steps of this was a really long one, and it was more intuitive and just playing around. So in the beginning, I asked the students in the fibers department to send me their denim pieces that they don't wear anymore. And from this, I was creating actually swatches I have there. I was creating those pieces, playing around, patchworking and mending, experimenting with mending techniques. And when I was doing this, I would have scraps, like little threads, little denim swatches that there's no use for it. So I kept them. I always collect everything that I'm working with. So I collected them, and I was introduced into gel print. It's a technique where it's a gel, you put ink on top of it, and you can press a fiber, like you can press something onto it, and you can pick up the imprint of whatever you press onto. And so I tried I tried to see if the denim would work, and it did. So coming from that, I was also in a class called Jacquard, where you're using Photoshop to create an image that you could weave. So you could also weave your face, so you could weave really intricate images. And so I took the image, the imprints that I collected from the gel print, and I wove them. And so there are 4 pieces that I did. They're more of a swatch size. And so I wanted to continue to push this project. And in 2018, I had the opportunity to go back to Kenya and visit my family. And so I took them with me, and we went to Masai Mara. It's very far. We had to drive a long way. And there I met this wonderful artisan in Masai Mara. And I asked her, hey, could we collaborate here? Where, of course, I would pay for her time and for her work, where she would create Masai beading inspired however she wanted it. I just wanted to have beads on top of it because there was something, I was just trying to play around and see how I could incorporate working with artisans in Kenya with my work that I was creating here. And so here where she's playing with the Maasai beads and spreading them around, and I believe she also got help from other women in the community. So here you're seeing their interpretation of my work, like whatever they felt the piece wanted at the time.
It's a beautiful collaboration. So you were visiting Kenya when you engaged the local woman in Maasai to do the bead embroidery for these, but how did you initially forge that connection? Like, how did you establish that relationship?
We were visiting my aunt's camp. They live in Britain, and they have a camp where every year students in UK, high school students, they go there and camp. And so I knew of the lady through my aunt, where her husband works for my aunt, where they monitor, how do you say, like security purposes of the land. And so I knew her, I knew the woman from her husband.
Wonderful. And just in my own experiences, and you can even see here with the fringe, the selvage that's left on these weavings, that when you're working with a jacquard loom, the thread count is very high. There's many ends per inch. So yes. Approximately how long did it take you to weave each of these 4 pieces?
This piece took me maybe 4 days. So the thing is, you have when you have access to the jacquard machine, you have to commit to a certain time. So because we in fibers department right now, we have one machine that about 15 students use. So you have a limited time. So when you assign your time, maybe 3 days, I had the weekend and a Monday. You have to like spend the night there if you have to, and really finish your piece. This piece, actually, these two, these were the first ones I started with, where I was using yarn for shoes, because I was trying to have to have the piece be strong in a way. So I was using really thick, strong yarn. And then the other 2 pieces, I ran out of that yarn that I bought in New York, so I couldn't order it. So my professor and we decided on this other yarn that was provided to me by the school. And so these pieces actually, how do you say, stretched. Yes, these 2 stretched more because of the thickness of the yarn, and then the other ones are much smaller because they were more thin.
Okay, yes, that does make sense. So in the process of working on this jacquard loom, what you're saying is that once you start, you have to finish your project, because the next student needs to come on and weave their project following you. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
You don't want to be blamed for another person not doing the project.
Cool. I love the collaboration with this piece in particular, these 4 pieces. It's absolutely beautiful, and it sounds like you're not only collaborating with the students in terms of, sourcing materials for the inspiration for these prints, you're also collaborating with them in terms of scheduling, and then of course the addition of the embellishment with the Maasai bead embroiderer is a really beautiful touch to add some color there. So thank you. Thank you for sharing, Victoria.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, that concludes the 4 alumni that we're going to speak to about their projects today. But I would also like to take a moment to share that there are an additional 10 alumni that are part of this virtual exhibition, and they will be featured via Interface's blog and our social channels. So be sure to follow along at Interface to be able to see. So I have included their headshots here as well as their different programs of study. We have 4 additional alumni that are coming out of the Fibers program. We have 2 additional alumni that are coming from the painting program, 3 additional alumni from the industrial design program with a little bit in product design as well, and then 1 additional alumni, or alumna, I should say, out of the interior design program. So I hope that you were thoroughly inspired, just as much as I was, by this collection of work from the newest generation of emerging artists and designers that are absolutely going to be influencing not only our industry, but many other industries for years to come. And with that, I would like to open it up. We can open the dialogue and take some questions from the audience. So as Lauren Clark had mentioned, please feel free to use the chat bar to ask any questions that you may have for Brett, Ashna, Rebecca, and Victoria.
Thanks, Gretchen. We actually have a couple. So I'll start with Brett. And the first question is, it looks like you used a mix of hand sketching and rendering prior to construction. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that was actually a really helpful part of it, because in order to understand his designs, Andrea Borgogni, I had to sketch some of his work. I had to figure out my language inspired by his work, which entailed a lot of hand sketching. And then in order to actually print the model, I had to explore a lot of different facets in Rhino. So a lot of CAD modeling, a lot of sketching and back and forth until I finally landed on something I liked.
And I did have I had a supplemental question actually, Lauren, for Brett. When you had initially mentioned with the Project Blue that that piece was 3D printed, it's difficult to sort of tell the scale from the photographs that we have. So could you share a little bit about the scale and also maybe how long it took for that to go through the 3D printing process?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a funny story. So there's actually one area on that piece that's really, really thin. And in order to get it thick enough to print, it had to be about a foot tall. So it was a relatively large print, but I actually got it back cracked in half. So I had to repair it and then sand it and finish it and everything. But yeah, I guess I wanted to throw that out there.
So what is the repair process like when you're repairing a 3D printed piece that has cracked upon receiving it back from like that team at SCAD?
So yeah, they kind of just said, I'm sorry it cracked, but you can fix it. And I was like, okay, that's a good learning experience, I guess. And so what I ended up doing is I made the wooden base first, and then I had the 2 parts glued on the base. And so I was able to connect it through that, and then I epoxied it together, and then I taped around it and then painted it.
Nice. Very cool. Well, you can't tell, certainly. The piece is absolutely seamless and gorgeous, especially with the final coat of paint.
Thank you.
The second question for you, Brett, was just around the artist that you were inspired by and what really drew you to him.
Yeah, so the assignment. Oh, that was weird. The assignment. Should I go?
It may help
yeah.
other panelists mute themselves. Yeah.
So the assignment itself was really interesting. It was really open to interpretation. He just wanted us to copy a design language that already existed. And a lot of people chose, I guess, really common brands, maybe like Bose and Sony and stuff like that, which is obviously extremely admirable. And I understand the practicality of that, but I really wanted to explore kind of the art side of design too, like really sculptural geometry and stuff. And I just kind of wanted to have a good time with it as well. Because sorry, he has a chair called Maybe Chair, which is just beautiful. Like it's probably one of my favorite chairs I've ever seen. It's just so nice, and I guess I just wanted to see how well I could use those forms and those designs.
Well, that exercise is so critical, you know, especially as so many designers go off and end up working for manufacturers, you know, like myself, that you have to live inside of their brand in some way. And being able to translate that language is so useful. Very cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Ashna, there's a statement. It's not a question, but there's a statement for you that says the stencil work is magnificent. It truly looks 3D.
Thank you.
Rebecca, we had a couple for questions about your piece. First, what rendering software did you use?
I used a couple different rendering softwares. So I built everything architecturally in Revit, and then I moved it over to SketchUp to add some of the detailing in FF&E and furniture. And then I rendered it through Inkscape, which is an input program. So it went through a few different hands. Then obviously I did use Photoshop at the end to touch up a few things.
That sounds super complex, but that makes sense as to why the renderings look so wonderful.
Great. And the second question was around the ceiling light fixtures that were proposed to be on the turf area. What were those?
Those are mesh. I saw an installation piece at a museum that kind of sparked that interest. So they're mesh pieces, and if I would have shown the rendering of the main gym experience that had that atrium that connected the first floor and the second floor, that same mesh lighting feature was used throughout that space as well. And I wanted something that you could see through. So it's providing lighting for the appropriate task in that space, but you can see through up to the second floor of the atrium and see that visual connection between the first floor and the second floor, being that they're both physical wellness driven. And then that lighting fixture meandered its way throughout some of the other parts, like the warm-up area that you guys saw in the rendering.
It sounds like someone has a specific project in mind, Lauren.
It does. So you're welcome. So lastly, for Victoria, this one's around the technique and process you used for cluster. Will you talk about that a little bit more?
The technique that I used?
Yes, for cluster.
It's a gel print. I can show you, but basically it's not that complicated to me. I'd rather show than explain, but it's a gel print where you would put ink on top and then take whatever textile or object you have, and you can press it onto the gel print, where you would take it out and then place like a plain paper, and when you pick it up, the imprint will be left on the paper. And then, okay, now I know, I understand the question more now. And then I scanned the image of the imprint and then take it to Photoshop, where I translated to about 6 colors or something. So you have to reduce the size for Jacquard. I forget the program. This was 1 year ago, but you reduce the size and the colors to about 6 colors, and then you transfer the Photoshop into a weaving piece, where you choose the kind of how do you call this?
Like the weaving. Okay.
Yes, the weaving techniques that you want, and then you weave it, and it gets programmed to the loom, the Jacquard loom, and then it reads as you go, it reads your file.
Yeah. So many upholstery fabrics in the industry now are using Jacquard weaving, and I especially love to see the really artistic interpretations, you know, because sometimes you're using Jacquard Weaving to look like a more simple type of textile, but in your example, it truly looks like a photograph. You can really see all of that depth and texture in there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure hosting the four of you. It was a joy, one of my absolute favorite things that I've ever had to do in my job by far, to go through all of your portfolios and look through and read all of your artist statements. I felt like I was back in school again, and it was wonderful. So I hope that all of our audience members and all of our designers felt a healthy dose of inspiration, and stay tuned for the blog post that will be featuring all 14 of our wonderful SCAD alumni and their incredible projects, and you can dive in. And I will also note that there are contact informations for each of those designers that will be published on the blog, so that you can follow through on their websites or follow through with their Instagram. Make sure that you're tapping into Brett when he goes into full production of that coat rack, so that you can pick it up or specify it on your next project. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.